Thanks very much, MC. My name is Mthunzi Madia from the Department of Transport, Maritime branch. I'm an acting Deputy Director General responsible for maritime matters, and maybe that's why I've been asked to say a few words. I think it's safe to say the government's responsibility is to develop policies. That's why we spend so much time in meetings, because we are trying to develop policies that are relevant, that are practical, that are achievable, that are also going to contribute to reducing unemployment, poverty, and inequalities. I think that is our main objectives of our existence. Through that, we want to see transformation. Sometime, I think it was on the 15th of July last year, the Minister of Transport, Honorable Maswangani, in the presence of the Deputy Minister Chikunga, launched the Comprehensive Transport Maritime Policy. I think it was a milestone for the sector for various reasons. And we were always reminded that the reason why there's no investment in the sector because there's no certainty. Then we needed to have a policy. So South Africa today has a CMPT, as Mr. Nduli will call it, that needs to be implemented, because you need a systematic approach to make sure that the policy doesn't remain a policy, but it is implemented and implementable. We will be going to Cabinet before the end of government financial year, seeking the approval of the Cabinet for the CNPT's implementation strategy. And I'll also talk about that and the role of SAMSA with that implementation strategy. Because when you develop a strategy, at least you are able to now craft the policy into chunks that you can be able to digest. In doing so, you also make sure that you set targets that are achievable, not only for government, but for the sector itself. And we also know that if the sector doesn't want to change, then we need to implement legislations. We hope we don't get to a point whereby we need to go and develop legislations because the sector does not want to implement the policy, because it is in the best interest of this country. Some of the elements of the strategy is to look at the low-hanging fruits in the sector. One of them is the coastal shipping in this country. In fact, the coastal shipping, I'm happy that the Secretariat of the Oceans Economy, Mr. Shea, is present. Because when we finalized the operation package, we said we needed the coastal shipping before the policy itself. That's how desperate we were. But we realized that we needed to have this overarching instrument. Out of that overarching instrument, then we can be able to develop a different instrument. Because when we're looking at the sector and asking ourselves, what is it that we think is easy to get from the sector itself? We said one of them is a coastal shipping, because at least we've got the volumes. unless someone tells me otherwise. We've got the volumes that can be moved through the coastal shipping. The liquid bulk is one of them. You move the cargo from east to west or west to east, depending on where the product is needed. It happens every day. And we also know that the vessels that are currently doing that are not South African registered, let alone owned. But if we talk about the meaningful involvement of people that never had an opportunity, the sector should be brave enough to sign these off-take agreements so that people can go on the market and secure the vessels and come back to this country and start to operate. We know that the automotive sector is also a low-hanging fruit for this country. There are many cars that are coming from Roslyn, Pretoria North. We've got about 4 or 5 OEMs from that region. And they need to be either supplied to Western Cape region or KwaZulu-Natal. I'm talking solely for domestic consumption, not for export market. And it justifies to have the vessels that are moving that cargo. So we hope as we implement the strategy of the policy, it will touch on those issues because we feel that we can have a meaningful impact on the sector. Acting CEO, I think you'll be pleased to know that 2 days ago we presented the SAMSA funding model to the ESCO of DOT. I think it's a critical instrument to make SAMSA sustainable, so that you can be able to get the resources that you require to perform your duties. It is important because it means government as a department can be able to focus on other issues where the fiscal burden is a reality. And the sector itself will be able to fund SAMSA so that SAMSA can discharge its responsibility. So we are just finalizing that. We'll be sending that information officially to your office so that you can start to implement the funding model. The department is also finalizing the merchant shipping bill. It must go to cabinet, I think, before the end of this financial year as well. I think we've got very tight timelines. That bill is important for the sector because currently we are using the 1951 Act of the Merchant Shipping, which is outdated, irrelevant. It doesn't talk to the challenges that we are facing as a sector, particularly in South Africa. So the department felt that it was important that it relook on the Merchant Shipping Act so that it talks to the issues that we are facing as a country. It's also important, Acting CEO, to note that the salvage strategy has been finalized. We'll be discussing that issue with you. That looks at what are the risks that the country might face in the future. And if you link that with the funding model, once we have looked at all the risk assessments, then we are able to say what is it we need to do. Do we have funds to do that work? Then we think the salvage strategy will be implementable based on the funding model that SAMSA will be implementing moving forward. I just want now to move away from the issues of law and legislations and regulations and talk about the practical issues that are facing this country in the maritime sector, which then triggered for us to also look at the National Ports Act review. Because that's what the policy said. It said we need to relook the commercial ports policy After that, then we look at the National Ports Act. I think the National Ports Act is the biggest instrument that government has right now to force the industry to transform. Peter has spoken about what is happening in the Port of Durban. We are talking about what is happening on the rail stage of the Ports Authority. We feel we need to do something because that's what the Act says. If your term comes to an end after 20, 25 years, and then the law says you must vacate the port so that the new tenants can come into the port system. And Transnet has been very clear to say whoever then participates in that space moving forward must have a minimum of 51% black ownership. And we hope and we trust we'll be able to use those instruments to make sure that people that never had an opportunity are given an opportunity to participate in the port space. And we feel that and SAMSA is also responsible to promote economic interest of this country. Those are the 3 legs in the mandate of SAMSA, which are legislated. All these legislations and bills and strategies that I'm talking about here, chunk of those instruments SAMSA is supposed to implement. Because SAMSA, it is an implementing agency of the department. And we are committing acting CEO as a department that will support you. We'll make sure that all the resources that are required, and I can see the board members are smiling. We'll make sure that we give you support so that you can be able to execute your responsibilities. I think with those few words, and I don't want to be between Dina and people. So I thank you.